When you understand death, you stop wasting life. Buddhist wisdom. Everyone knows they will die. This is not new information. You have known this since you were a child. Perhaps the first time you saw a dead bird on the ground, or the first time someone explained that grandparents do not live forever. You know it. Of course you know it. But here is the strange thing. This knowing sits somewhere far away. It floats at the edge of your mind like a distant cloud, always there, but never quite touching you. It belongs to someday. It belongs to later. It belongs to other people, to old age, to hospitals, to news headlines. It does not belong to this morning. It does not belong to this breath. And because this knowing stays so far away, we postpone. We postpone saying, "I love you," to the people who matter most. Not because we do not love them, but because we assume there will always be another chance. We postpone forgiving, not because we want to hold on to anger, but because forgiveness feels like something we can do later, when we are ready, when it hurts less. We postpone letting go of what weighs us down, the old resentments, the unnecessary worries, because releasing them feels like a task for another day. We know death as a concept, but we have never truly felt it deeply enough to change how we live today. This is the problem that Buddhist teaching has pointed to for over 2,500 years. The teaching does not ask us to fear death. It does not use death to frighten us into obedience or to make us anxious about what comes after. It offers something far more radical: to look directly at death, to bring it close, to let it wake us up. In the Buddhist tradition, there is a practice called Maranasati, mindfulness of death. This practice is not what most people imagine. It is not morbid. It is not depressing. It is not sitting in a dark room thinking about funerals. It is something else entirely. In the Maranasati Sutta, this practice is described with surprising clarity. Mindfulness of death, when developed and pursued, is of great fruit and great benefit. It gains a footing in the deathless, has the deathless as its final end. Therefore, you should develop mindfulness of death. Notice what is being said here. Contemplating death does not lead to despair. It leads to the deathless. The deathless in Buddhist teaching refers to nibbana, the unconditioned, the end of all suffering. This is a profound paradox. By facing death fully, we touch something beyond death. By accepting impermanence completely, we find what does not pass away. But before we go further, let me be clear about what this video is not about. This is not about promoting pessimism or using death as a weapon to frighten you. And it is certainly not about living fast. That shallow philosophy that says, since we will die anyway, we should grab as much pleasure as possible before it ends. That is just another form of running away from death, not facing it. What we are exploring here is something deeper. Something that has the power to transform not just what you do, but how you see, how you feel, how you move through each ordinary day. There is a word in the ancient Pali language that captures something essential about what it means to truly waste one's life. The word is pamada. It is usually translated as heedlessness or negligence, but these English words do not fully convey its meaning. Pamada is a kind of spiritual sleepwalking. It is being alive but not really here. It is letting your days pass by while your mind drifts somewhere else, caught in regret about the past, anxiety about the future, or simply numb to what is happening right now. It is living on autopilot, reacting to life out of habit rather than responding with awareness. You know this state. We all do. It is when you eat a meal, but cannot remember what it tasted like because your mind was scrolling through worries the whole time. It is when you sit with someone you love, but do not really see them, because you are thinking about what you need to do tomorrow. It is when years pass, and you suddenly realize you have been postponing the things that matter most, always waiting for the right time, the right conditions, the right feeling. Pamada shows up in small ways. You get angry at someone over something trivial, completely forgetting that both of you will die. That this argument, this irritation, this need to be right, will mean nothing in the end. You hold on to resentment towards someone who hurt you, as if you have unlimited time to forgive them later. You chase after status, money, approval, without ever stopping to ask, does this truly matter? Will this matter when I am dying? From the perspective of Buddhist teaching, there is no greater waste than this. Not a lack of achievements, not a lack of experiences, but a lack of presence. A lack of waking up to what is actually here. In the Dhammapada, one of the most ancient collections of Buddhist teaching, there is a verse that cuts straight to the heart of this. Heedfulness is the path to the deathless. Heedlessness is the path to death. The heedful do not die. The heedless are as if already dead. The heedless are as if already dead. This is precise observation. The teaching is pointing out that death is not only what happens at the end of your life when your heart stops beating. There is another kind of death, a death that happens while you are still breathing. It is the death of being absent from your own life, the death of going through the motions without awareness, the death of letting your days slip by in a fog of distraction and postponement. A person can be physically alive for 80 years and yet be dead for most of them. Dead to the beauty around them, dead to the people who love them, dead to the preciousness of each unrepeatable moment. But why do we fall into heedlessness so easily? Why is pamada the default state for most human beings? The answer is simple. Because death always feels far away. When you wake up in the morning, you do not think I might die today. You think about your tasks, your problems, your plans. Death is something that happens to other people, something that will come someday, but not now, not yet, not today. And because death feels distant, there is no urgency. You can always meditate tomorrow. You can always forgive later. You can always tell them you love them next time. There is always more time, until there is not. In the Dhammapada, there is another verse that speaks directly to this. People, other than the wise, do not realize, we in this world must all die, and not realizing it, continue their quarrels. The wise realize it, and thereby their quarrels cease. Look at what happens when you truly realize, not just intellectually know, but deeply realize, that you and the person you are arguing with will both die. Suddenly the quarrel seems absurd. Suddenly what matters is not winning, but connecting, understanding, loving, while there is still time. But here is an important clarification. Heedfulness, the opposite of pamada, does not mean living in a state of panic. It does not mean rushing around trying to accomplish everything before you die. Heedfulness is not about doing more. It is about being more present in whatever you do. It means living deeply, living ethically, living awake, not rushed, not anxious, but calm and purposeful. There is a passage in the Buddhist texts that illustrates exactly how serious this teaching about mindfulness of death really is. In the Maranasati Sutta, a group of monks were asked how they practiced mindfulness of death. One monk answered, "I think to myself, may I live for a day and a night, that I may attend to the teaching. I would accomplish much." Another monk said, "I think to myself, may I live for a day." Another, "May I live for half a day." Another, "May I live for the time it takes to eat a meal." Another, "May I live for the time it takes to chew and swallow 4 or 5 mouthfuls of food." You might expect these monks to be praised for their dedication. After all, they were contemplating death with remarkable seriousness, measuring their lives in meals, in mouthfuls of food. But the response recorded in the sutta was unexpected. You are still living heedlessly, even thinking you might live for the time it takes to eat a meal. That is still too much assumption. That is still treating death as something in the future, something that will come after. Then the proper way to practice mindfulness of death was explained. One should be mindful of death like this: my life lasts only as long as one breath. Practicing mindfulness of death in this way is to live without heedlessness and leads to the ending of all defilements. One breath. Not a year, not a month, not a day, not even the time it takes to finish a meal. One breath. Between this inhale and the next exhale, you are alive. That is the only guarantee you have. Everything else is assumption. In the Bhattacharata Sutta, this same urgency is expressed in different words. Today's the day to keenly work. Who knows? Tomorrow may bring death, for there is no bargain to be struck with death and his mighty horde. There is no bargain to be struck. You cannot negotiate with death. You cannot ask for an extension. You cannot say, "Just a little more time, I am not ready yet." Death does not send a warning. It does not wait until your affairs are in order, until you have said what you needed to say. This is simply the truth of our situation, not a threat, not a punishment, just the way things are. And when you let this truth in, really let it in, something unexpected happens. You might expect that facing death so directly would make you depressed. You might expect it would fill you with dread or make life seem pointless. But that is not what actually occurs. What arises when you stop pushing death away is gratitude. Not gratitude as a technique, not practice being grateful as self-help advice, but a spontaneous appreciation that emerges naturally when you recognize how fragile and temporary everything is. The cup of tea in your hand, you will not hold it forever. One day, there will be a last cup of tea, and you will not know it is the last. Your mother's voice on the phone, you will not hear it forever. This morning light coming through the window, it will not last. When impermanence stops being a concept and becomes something you actually feel in your body, ordinary things reveal their preciousness. You do not need to force appreciation. It arises on its own because you finally see what was always true. Nothing is guaranteed, nothing is permanent, and therefore everything present right now is already a gift. Buddhist teaching speaks of beings intoxicated by youth, by health, by life itself. These are called the 3 intoxications, and they blind us. We take things for granted precisely because we assume they will always be there. Remove that assumption, and suddenly the world becomes vivid again. A person who genuinely contemplates death does not become gloomy. They become softer, more present, more able to appreciate what is here before it is gone. And alongside this gratitude, something else arises: compassion. When you recognize that everyone you meet is going to die, everyone is walking toward the same end, everyone is carrying their own fears and sorrows, something softens in you. The need to judge falls away. You see others not as obstacles or competitors, but as fellow travelers in this brief, fragile existence. If you are listening to this and feeling regret, feeling that you have wasted years of your life in heedlessness, let that regret go. The past is gone. What matters is not what you did or did not do before this moment. What matters is what you do now. This is not a threat. This is responsibility. The recognition that you can choose, right now, how to live from this moment forward. You are the owner of your actions, and you will inherit their results. The past does not define you. Your choices in this moment do. We have traveled through some deep territory together. We have looked at how the knowing of death stays far away, how heedlessness is a kind of living death, and how truly facing impermanence can awaken gratitude and compassion rather than despair. But understanding is not enough. Buddhist teaching is very clear about this. It is not philosophy for its own sake. It is a path, something to be walked, practiced, lived. So what does this look like in daily life? There is a practice recorded in the Upajjhana Sutta that has been used for over 2,500 years. It is called the 5 Daily Contemplations. I am subject to aging. I cannot escape aging. I am subject to illness. I cannot escape illness. I am subject to death. I cannot escape death. All that is mine, dear and delightful, will change and vanish. I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, supported by my karma. Whatever karma I do, for good or for evil, I will be the heir to that. These are not affirmations to make you feel good. They are truths to make you awake. Beings are intoxicated with youth, with health, with life, and this intoxication leads to heedless action, to living in a fog. But when we regularly contemplate these 5 truths, the intoxication fades. We see clearly. And from that clarity, we naturally live with more care, more presence, more integrity. You do not need to force yourself to be a better person. When you truly see impermanence, when it stops being a concept and becomes lived understanding, ethical behavior arises naturally. Why would you waste your brief time harming others? Why would you spend your precious days in anger and resentment? The wish to live well comes from seeing clearly, not from forcing yourself to be good. And there is something else that happens when death stops being abstract. Presence is no longer a technique you have to remember. It becomes the natural way you move through life. You eat, and you actually taste the food, because you know there will be a last meal someday. You talk with someone you love, and you actually listen, because you know this conversation is unrepeatable. You look at the sky, at the trees, at the face of a stranger on the street, and you actually see, because the fog of "there is always more time" has lifted. In the Bhattacharata Sutta, this way of being is described with beautiful simplicity. Don't run back to the past. Don't anticipate the future. What's past is left behind. The future has not arrived. And any present phenomenon you clearly discern in every case. This is not about forcing yourself to be in the moment. It is about removing the illusion that made you absent in the first place. The illusion that there is always more time. When that illusion falls away, presence is what remains. So this is the invitation. Not to become a different person. Not to adopt a new set of beliefs. Simply to let the truth of death come a little closer. To stop pushing it away. To let it do its work, which is not to frighten you, but to wake you up. Understanding death does not make life dark. It makes life clear. When death is no longer a distant concept, but a living awareness, something you feel in your bones, not just know in your head, everything shifts. You stop postponing what matters. You stop getting angry over small things. You stop holding on to resentment. You begin to notice what you had been overlooking. You begin to appreciate what you had been taking for granted. You begin to live, truly live, one moment at a time. That is not fear. That is freedom. If this has touched something in you, I want to leave you with one small invitation. Take a moment of silence. Place your hand on your chest. Feel your heart beating. Feel the breath moving in and out. You are still alive. You are still breathing. And that itself, that simple fact that you are here, that you exist, that you have this moment, is extraordinary. You did not earn this moment. You cannot guarantee the next one. But you have this one. Right now. What will you do with it?